Congressman Brad Ashford, retired General Don Bacon. The second Congressional District Debate, presented by the Omaha World Herald and KMTV Action 3 News.
Hello and welcome to this evening's debate in the race for Congress, Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District. I'm Michael Severe from the Omaha World Herald.
And I'm Craig Negrelli from KMTV. We will be your moderators. Thank you for joining us. For the next hour, we are hoping to have a robust exchange of ideas between the two candidates. Republican challenger Don Bacon, a retired brigadier general who lives in Papillion, and Democrat Brad Ashford, the incumbent congressman and former state senator from Omaha. We're going to make the debate as free-flowing as we can, but we want to give equal time to each candidate. We are asking them to keep their answers at about 60 seconds. When we ask you to move on, please do so.
In addition, we reserve the right to ask follow-up questions. We'll also give you a chance to respond if you're directly criticized by your opponent. So let's get started. Mr. Ashford drew the first question as a drawing of cards held earlier. Mr. Ashford, we start with debate with questions about the presidential race and your party's two nominees. As a member of the House Armed Services Committee, you received classified briefings in light of Clinton's controversial email system, a system that the FBI director called reckless. How can you trust your party's presidential nominee to handle confidential material in the White House?
Craig and Michael, thank you, first of all, for putting this together. It's an exceptional opportunity for us, for both of us, and we appreciate it. And thanks to KMTV and to the Omaha World Herald. You're right. I received classified briefings on the Armed Services Committee, on the Emerging Threat Subcommittee, and also on the Strategic Forces Subcommittee on a pretty much weekly basis. And we are told about the classified information that we're getting, and it is part of how I make my judgments on the floor and in the votes that we take in the committee. There's no excuse for Secretary Clinton's use of a private server, and I've said that over and over again. However, I do believe that Secretary Clinton has the experience and certainly the relationships in the Congress to move our country forward. She knows the world leaders. She knows the leaders in the Congress, both in the House and in the Senate. And that's a critical part of as we move forward to have those kinds of relationships.
Thank you, Mr. Ashford. You have 30 seconds, Mr. Bacon.
The emails that she had on, there were 2,000 classified emails. Some were top secret. Some had information about agents that were serving our country abroad. It would undermine the national security of our country. And then she lied to the American people for 16 months. And she's still lying about the fact that some of the information was not stamped classified, but they were. I think she was wrong. She undermined our nation's security.
Mr. Bacon, this next question is for you, and you have 60 seconds. You have not ruled out the possibility of voting for Donald Trump, although you want him to step down. Given your military background, do you believe he is fit to serve as Commander-in-Chief?
Well, I served 5 times as a commander in the United States Air Force, 8,000 folks in one command, 7,000 on down. If I would have said the things that he said, I would have been relieved of duty. They were embarrassing, they were wrong, inappropriate, unacceptable comments. However, if I would have done what Hillary Clinton did, I would have got court-martialed and sent to jail for having secrets at home and compromising our security. Well, let me share with you, I did take a hard stand Friday and Saturday. I still do. I've had family members who have been sexually assaulted, and I see the scars. So we have to stand tall on this. But in the end, he said something wrong. She's done something wrong.
Mr. Ashford?
You know, Don, you really can't have it both ways. I think, first of all, I believe you said that you were very supportive of Donald Trump throughout the many statements that he's made up until the weekend. Then you suggested that he, quite frankly, should not be, he should step down, and then you said, but you would vote for him, and you said again you would vote for him. He called the generals rubble. He called the generals rubble. Those kinds of statements are reflective of his character, and I don't think he is competent or qualified to be President of the United States.
If I may.
Yes.
You know, my candidate or nominee, I didn't support during the primary. He wasn't my first or second choice, but Brad has been in the leadership team of Hillary Clinton since last December and has supported her. In the end, he said things that were inappropriate and they were indefensible, but she did things that undermined the nation's security and lied to our country. So I'm going to have to vote for someone that I have reservations about, but in the end, I'll support him over her, because in the end, we cannot afford to have her in our leading our country, spending more, taxing more, and undermining our nation's security.
We're going to talk national security now. We're going to start with Mr. Ashford. Which nation do you think poses the greatest long-term threat to the United States, and why, Mr. Ashford?
Russia poses the greatest long-term threat. And as I mentioned earlier, I sit on the Armed Services Emerging Threat Subcommittee. I receive classified briefings every week on the Russian threat. There's absolutely no question to me, there's no question that for me, Russia represents a threat that will be with us for a long time to come. And they've exhibited that threat in Syria, in Crimea, throughout the Baltic. I've had the opportunity to visit our leaders throughout the Middle East and in the Baltic. And it's clear to me that Russia is pushing and pushing. We've made some decisions in the last year or so to aggressively defend against that, but the cyber issue is critical, and we need to stand up our cyber command as we are doing to address this. But Russia clearly is, in my view, the threat.
Mr. Bacon, you have 60 seconds to answer the question.
Well, cyber command's been stood up for a couple of years now. I've been to Russia. I've been an intelligence officer for roughly 30 years, also doing reconnaissance. I've also been involved with cyber as well as a 30-year Air Force veteran. I do think Russia is the largest existential threat. They have intercontinental ballistic missiles, bombers, submarines. Putin has seen weakness in this president, and he's trying to push out there to see how far he can go. We need to be strong and have a strong deterrence. But I think the more volatile threat is Iran in 10 years. They have sworn the destruction of Israel. They're going to have a nuclear capability that's recognized, perhaps in a decade. And that's what scares me most at about 10 years out.
Mr. Bacon, how would you rate President Obama's strategy of fighting Islamic State militants in Iraq and Syria? And what, if anything, would you do differently?
Well, I've been deployed 4 times in the Middle East. I did it 1 year in Baghdad with General Petraeus. Then I commanded a squadron during the invasion of Iraq. I spent probably the last 10 years, roughly, studying the Islamic terrorism threat. I think President Obama did too little, too late when it came to going after ISIS. The bombing campaign for several years was like 6 to 7 strikes a day. Those are pinpricks when you look at the size of the territory that ISIS controlled. We have stepped up the air campaign, and we need to do more. But frankly, we got to be broader than that. We have to have a holistic strategy to defeat these folks. We have to go after their finances. We have to degrade the cyber recruiting that they do over the internet. And then we have to also have a conversation about what motivates these folks to join so we can undermine them, working with the Sunni friends of more moderate nations.
Mr. Ashford, 60 seconds on President Obama's strategy of fighting the Islamic State.
First of all, we need a no-fly zone in Syria, and we need a safe zone in Syria, unquestionably. And we should have done that before, and I criticize the president for not making that decision earlier. We are up to 20 strikes a day. We have killed 45,000 ISIS fighters, but the fight will go on. It needs to go on. In Iraq, we have been able to push back ISIS and have been able to get 45% of the territory back that was taken by ISIS and 20% in Syria. We need an authorization for use of force. I have called for that since the day I came into Congress, an authorization for use of force which will set the mission. When I was in the Middle East, I had 3 trips to the Middle East. Our commanders said, we need this, we need it now, we need to make sure that we do not cut the budget for the military anymore and that we add to it, and we've done that. We need to have a robust funding, stable funding. We need to have an authorization for use of force, a no-fly zone and a safe zone. And then we have to have some sort of way of moving forward after ISIS is destroyed, and that needs to be part of the AUMF.
Next question, gentlemen.
If I may?
Yeah, sure. Go, sir.
I do think we do need an authorization to use force. It's been since 9/11, then the invasion of Iraq. I would agree there. But I would tell you that ISIS is growing every day, even though there's been some success in Baghdad. They recruit every day over the internet, and roughly 30 people a day are recruited. And we've got to go after the recruiting of ISIS, which is worldwide, some of which stay in their home countries and are self-radicalized and are threats to our own country.
Next question, gentlemen. Russian hacking has come up at the national level with claims the nation is trying to influence this country's elections. How should America defend itself going forward against the foreign cyber attacks? We start off with Mr. Ashford.
Thank you. First of all, we've had a cyber command, but we haven't had the cyber force that we're standing up now. By 2018, we will have approximately 6,200 new cyber warriors under the Cyber Command force. I think we need, Cyber Command needs to be a separate combatant command, in my view. Now it's under STRATCOM. I think it ought to be a separate combatant command. We also ought to enlarge our opportunity for working with the private sector and bring expertise from Silicon Valley and, quite frankly, from right here in Omaha to help with the cyber fight. I had an opportunity to talk to the CEO of Mutual of Omaha a year ago or so, and we came up with this idea of lend-lease of private sector technology people that we could bring into the military to help with the cyber fight. It's an all hands on deck, private sector, military, to get to not only defend but have an offensive strategy against cyber. There's much more to be done. We've had a good start, but we need to do more.
Mr. Bacon, you have 60 seconds to answer the question.
Thank you. I was actually there during the startup of the Air Force Cyber and all the teams that were building. Russia does pose the largest threat to our cyber. China is very active, though, into our private industry, trying to take our intellectual secrets. We have other countries involved as well. I've been part of the cyber stand-up, and we need to continue investing in cyber and growing the teams. I will tell you that we've made a lot of headway with Russia and China, but we need to do more with the counterterrorism part of our cyber to understand how the Sunni insurgents are using the internet, so we have to grow that capability as well.
All right, Mr. Bacon, a similar topic. You have 60 seconds. We've already discussed Russia, but let's further the conversation. How would you handle Russian President Vladimir Putin? Should we treat him as a friend or foe? Why or why not?
Now, he's become an adversary. We don't want him to be an enemy, but he is surely working against our interests, and he respects strength. So what I fear what happened in Georgia, where he took away sections of their land, as well as Ukraine with the Crimea area, if we don't stand firm in the Baltics with Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia, and by the way, I've traveled there and I've worked with those countries. They're great allies. But we have to have a firm hand there and a presence to serve as a deterrence. And by the way, I think NATO does perform a very valuable function here, and we need to continue working with them, but we do need to make sure those countries contribute at the right level. But NATO and our Baltic states need our presence as a deterrence.
Mr. Ashford, how would you handle Vladimir Putin?
He is our adversary, and I believe we need to handle him aggressively. We're doing some of that now. We're rotating troops in and out of Poland. We have our Air Force in Romania. We are counteracting some of the social media efforts in the Baltic states. I've traveled to the Baltic states and to Sweden and to various other countries in the area and to our troops at Mildenhall in England. And there's absolutely no question that Russia, in buzzing our 55th, and Don knows probably better than anybody about the 55th and the buzzing of by the Russian planes. But we need to enforce our boundaries in Eastern Europe. We need to be clear, very clear in Syria with a no-fly zone that if Assad continues to go after the civilian population in Aleppo and other areas, that we are going to resist that with a no-fly zone. We need to make sure that the Russians understand that and that they understand that we are going to act aggressively if necessary.
I'd like just to make one commentary on that. To do a no-fly zone with the Russians already there is a recipe for conflict with the Russians. So I do not think it's a wise move to do the no-fly zone now. Now, we do need the safe havens. General Petraeus has proposed that. We need to put refugees in these areas to help protect them and feed them closer to home so they don't become refugees in Europe and here. But a no-fly area with the Russians is a recipe for conflict unless we coordinate with them. The no-fly zone was the thing to do before they got there. It's not the right thing now unless we coordinate.
I think we do need the no-fly zones, and I think we need to make it very clear to the Russians that we are going to aggressively enforce that against Assad. And I think we can, and that the diplomatic efforts in Geneva have stalled. I think we have to make it very clear to the Russians that we are going to protect civilians in safe zones, but also by enforcing a no-fly zone so that Assad's Air Force is not out in the field going after our Sunni partners, but also the civilian population. And obviously, the 250,000 people who have died in the tragedies of Aleppo need to be, in my view, need to be stopped aggressively.
You're going to have to coordinate with the Russians on this one because they are flying combat sorties every day. It's a recipe for conflict. The no-fly zone should be done before the Russians got there. Our president was too weak and didn't stand up in time to get this done. Now it's too late to be doing that, but we do need the safe havens for the refugees.
You know, I just think we need to aggressively do the no-fly zone, and I think we can coordinate with the Russians, but Assad needs to go. Eventually, Assad needs to go. ISIS needs to be destroyed first, but Assad needs to go. And we are coordinating with the Russians now, and I've been in the bases, and I know Don, of course, has, where those conversations go on between the Russians and our people. And there is some coordination going on, but we need to be very firm and clear, and Petraeus is right. We've met with General Petraeus on several occasions in the Armed Services Committee. His plan for a safe zone is appropriate, and I would support it.
We're going to move on to health care now. Mr. Ashford, just be the first question goes to you to start off. One of the more popular features of the health care law is the provision that bars insurance companies from denying coverage based on pre-existing conditions. The most unpopular part is the mandate, which requires everyone to have insurance. Experts say the two go hand in hand. Without the mandate, people would get insurance once they've had a heart attack. Do you agree? Can we have one without the other? Starting with you, Mr. Ashford.
First of all, in the Congress, there have been over 60, close to 70 now, efforts to repeal the ACA without a replacement plan. And so we've wasted, from 2010 till now, we've wasted time when we could be trying to reform it. And I do think we need to reform it. You're going to have to require, in order to cover for pre-existing conditions for 26-year-olds and their family, and for caps, lifetime caps, individuals are going to have to buy insurance. But we need to make that insurance more affordable. We need to work with insurance companies to do that. We need to work with small businesses to remove some of the mandates on them, because I don't think they are necessary. Employers already do provide insurance to their employees across the country. So I do think the mandates for individuals having insurance are important, but we have to get the cost down. We have to get costs down by reforming Obamacare, and that means working across the aisle to do it. And I've signed on to 10 bills to try to reform it, but it has to be done in a bipartisan way.
So, Bacon, you have 60 seconds, pre-existing conditions along with the mandate.
Well, we need to cover pre-existing conditions, but we don't have to do that with Obamacare. But for the rest, Brad Ashford is standing with Obamacare, one of the worst things have done to our economy. I tell you, I go around to small businesses all the time. It's always the number one or the number two problems they talk about. The average family is paying more than $3,700 in premiums now. Deductibles have skyrocketed. Obamacare has been a failure. It's been a failure to the middle class. It's been a failure to small businesses. I would repeal and replace Obamacare. There are good proposals right now in Congress to put out there, and we can fix this, but put it down at the state level. We do not want federal bureaucrats in charge, but Brad has voted for it twice, and it's a failure.
Mr. Bacon, what about the mandate? Do you believe the mandate needs to go?
No, I would take away all of Obamacare to include the mandate. Now, we do need pre-existing coverages. We can do that at the state level. We can ensure that folks are covered, 26-year-olds and below with their family. But we don't need Washington, D.C. and bureaucrats in D.C. running. We need patient-centered health care where people can take their insurance policy and go from job to job. These are some of the proposals that are now in Congress that we can enact. But Obamacare is a failure, and he should have opposed it. He stood with Nancy Pelosi and supported her in this effort.
Don, let's get the facts straight. When I ran, I said I would not have voted for Obamacare because it was not a bipartisan effort. What needs to be done in Washington is we need to address all of these problems in a bipartisan way. Your party has proposed the repeal of Obamacare 11 or 12 times since I've been there, about 55 or 60 times before I got there, without any replacement. So what do you tell the 20 million people now that do have insurance? What do you tell those who have pre-existing conditions that are now being dealt with that they have insurance? What do you tell the people with mental illness? We have to reform it, but that means working across the aisle. I want to see the plan that you're talking about. What is the plan you're talking about? I would be more than happy to support changes, and I've got 10 bills I'm co-sponsors of getting rid of the Cadillac tax.
Let's just specify one of the things that you brought up in there, Mr. Ashford. For those who say get rid of Obamacare, I think you threw out the figure 20 million, and it's anywhere between 16.5 and 20 million is what we've been hearing.
I think it's 20 overall, but I think it's 9 on the exchanges and the rest in other.
Okay, we just lost $2 million off of Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Well, let's talk to
Mr.
Blue Cross
Bacon,
and Blue Shield and find out.
Hold on, Mr. Ashford.
What would you do in terms of the getting rid of Obamacare. Would you support stripping people of their coverage? And what would you do with the people who signed up, got the coverage, and now here in 2016, it appears the rules might change?
So there's multiple great proposals right now in Congress. Dr. Price, he's a congressman from Georgia, orthopedic surgeon. In fact, he was just here in town this week briefing people on these proposals. What we need to do is get the regulatory authority out of Washington, D.C., out of the hands of D.C. bureaucrats, get it back at the state level. And what we want to do is ensure that patients, when you get your own coverage, you can go from job to job and take that coverage with you. We want more competition to help drive down costs. Obamacare has let the costs skyrocket. We need more competition to get that done. But we can cover folks and provide pre-existing coverage and also help out 26-year-olds and below stay with their family and still have the health care run at the state level and get it out of Washington, D.C.
Yeah, that's not a proposal, Don. I've been there on the floor for 19 months, taken several votes on the issue, not to repeal, but to find a way to fix it. And I know Dr. Price. I know that people talk about this sort of mysterious plan out there. I have never seen it. I've never seen one single suggestion in legislative form. I would be happy to look at a reform of Obamacare if someone would bring it forward in a legislative package. It is legislative negligence, in my view, to take what is purely a political position to repeal something because it's called Obamacare and the president proposed it, and it passed in a partisan manner, which I don't agree with. But that isn't fixing it. We have to fix it. We have to make sure that those 20 million continue to have coverage. We do need more competition. We need to give insurance companies the ability to do that. We need to deregulate physicians. They've been overly regulated. All those things we need to do, but we need to do it with a plan. I have not seen a plan. If you have a plan, I'd be happy to look at it.
Mr. Ashford, having said that, if you have a divided House and Senate like we do, well, the Republicans control the House and they control the Senate now. If the Democrats are to take back the Senate, but the Republicans control the House, what you just said about fixing it and improving it, aren't we just going to see a stalemate for another 2 to 4 years?
I think we're on the way to fixing it. First of all, I think the Cadillac tax is gone. If you talk to small businesses and to medium or large-sized businesses in their human resources department, the one area that we could do right away, and I think we might do it in the lame duck, is to get rid of the Cadillac tax. For the first time in the history of healthcare insurance, we're taxing healthcare insurance. We've never done that before. One of the reasons why employers bought into healthcare insurance after the war was because it was a benefit that was not taxed. We need to get rid of the Cadillac tax. There was an employer I was with the other day that talked about large employer, 40% of there'd be a 40% increase in the premium costs if we don't get rid of the Cadillac tax. I think that we need to make sure that we get rid of the mandate that businesses over 30 employees have to buy insurance. That's a crippler for small business. We need to look at the taxes that small businesses are being required to pay. So I would vote for all those things, Don, and I'd vote for giving the states more flexibility on products that insurance companies offer.
All right, we've tackled national security and health care. At this point, we will let the candidates catch their breath a bit. When we come back, they will ask each other a question. Stay with us. You're watching the Ashford-Bacon Congressional Debate right here on KMTV.